Hi, this is Kylie with Fim and Flow. I hope everyone's having a great day. So, wow, the Dark Global Elite are at it again. Jeez. So, you probably all know that Trump had a assassination attempt against him. I'm going to talk about that a little bit, and I'll get into some related topics. But I talk about it on previous episodes how many different souls come to Earth for a reason. And a huge reason is to break this false matrix of control that the Dark Elite has control over humanity with. I also mentioned on previous episodes that not every soul that chooses to come here for a higher purpose or for this reason, they don't all have personalities on Earth that are cozy and cuddly. Some might have more harsh personalities, have sharper edges, and this is so they catch the attention of society. I think I've heard this concept be called an instigator lightworker or something like that. I can't remember exactly. And this type of personality can be a huge catalyst for the awakening in others. It helps grab people's attention, maybe even negatively at first, but then it catches their attention and then it causes them to start eventually connecting these dots and realizing what's going on. Because if everything's so bright and shiny all the time, people might just stick to their status quo, stay in their own routines, stay in their own life. But if there's some instigator personality out there grabbing people's attention, then they're going to turn and listen and pay attention to what's going on. And I believe that Trump is one of these people. I believe he's one of the souls, this instigator type of light worker that is definitely here to help be a catalyst for mass awakening. And so people can start opening their eyes to what's been going on behind the scenes, and all of this darkness will be unveiled. And Trump may rub people the wrong way, but he has grabbed society's attention, and now many people are starting to connect the dots and seeing a lot of this darkness that is currently starting to be unveiled and will be continuing to be unveiled. Some very shady parts of society, like the corruption of the media, is very clear to many now. Mainstream media is literally propaganda. And think back to when Trump was first running as president. The media was absolutely against him. And I've mentioned before that I like fashion and interior design, and I even saw every elitist fashion magazine was putting Trump down and cheering for Hillary Clinton. I remember articles on social media from Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, all these fashion magazines really pushing Hillary Clinton and putting down Trump. And I've never really been into politics. And that was even before I started to see things from the point of view I have now. So I didn't think that much of it at the time, honestly. But I thought it was really weird. Like to the point I clearly remember it. And to the point I would unfollow these fashion publications on social media because it didn't sit right with me at all. It felt very weird even at the time. With all of the mainstream media pushing this narrative so hard, that was super divisive and caused a lot of friction in society. I don't know if you felt like this, but I felt like anyone who was pro Trump or wanted Trump to win or was voting for him, people who were against it were so against it, they would give you so much backlash. I know it was to the point that people who were for Trump, if they didn't have a big personality who were ready to debate and outspoken in that way, I really felt like people shut down and wouldn't share their true opinion because they didn't want to get attacked. And this part may just be my own opinion or my own perspective, but it seemed like every mass media channel, magazine, and social media post were completely propping up and pushing Hillary Clinton. That's what I was seeing. And so much, in fact, that I, and it seemed like many others, thought Hillary would easily win because that's just the narrative mainstream media was pushing. You saw it everywhere. And mainstream media was so against Trump. So at the time, if you think that the mainstream media is actually sentiment of how society's feeling, then yeah, you would so easily be confused. Now I see the truth and that whatever the narrative mainstream media is pushing, that has no correlation to public sentiment. But now, looking back, we know that some big social media companies were actually censoring posts and removing content that didn't go along with the left's agenda. And I will say, I've said this before, I don't align with any side, Republican or Democrat. Actually, I think I've talked about this all in another episode, but I don't align with either sides. And I'll talk about it more later in this episode. But this dark global elite has been able to infiltrate both groups. They have all these mechanisms in place to prop up people on either side who is going along with the agenda. And I'll mention it now and I'll mention it later when I talk more. But I do believe Trump is an anomaly here. And that's why they've been after him from the get go. And in the government, it seems like no matter which side goes into office, Republican or Democrat, not much change ever happens. It's all just for show. But there's nuance to this, and I'll get into it later. But typically, historically, I do believe it is all for show, and it doesn't really matter who gets picked because of all these mechanisms in place. But even though I just said I don't align with Republican or Democrat, and I think pretty much it's all the same. I say it's all part of the leftist agenda because I do think it all ties back to the leftist agenda because they want more government and they have all of these great ideas on what we should be spending on. And they really tug at people's heartstrings who care and want to help. But if you listen to my other episodes, you know how I feel about this government spending and this nonstop, never ending spending on wars and even foundations and charities. It all is just money laundering and it's going back into the pocket of the dark global elite. And that's how they're using us as slaves, basically. So that's why I say it all ties back to the leftist agenda. It's not really in the Democrat versus Republican sense, though. It goes beyond what people argue about on that surface level. But back to Trump winning against Hillary. Like I said, everywhere I saw mainstream media completely attacking Trump, really pushing up Hillary Clinton to the point that if you tied public sentiment with what was going on in the mainstream media narrative, you would also think this. You would think, wow, okay, Hillary's going to win. I think a lot of people thought that, and some diehard Hillary stands, they really went into what seemed like a depression after it. I saw people in my own life do this. And Trump was attacked by the media all through his presidency. And recently we saw the lawsuits against Trump that were clearly poised to get him out of the running. They're just attacking any little thing they can get him on. While so many other politicians and even Hollywood celebrities, all of their bad doing, it's just swept under the rug. Literally, they can hide any of that and change the narrative. But yet, Trump, they're completely going after him. And now, add cherry on top of the dang cake, now we saw an assassination attempt on Trump. And if it wasn't clear already, it is now that the dark global elite I talk about all the time does not want this man running. Trump is a threat to the system ran by the dark global elite. If we listen to the media and don't step back and think critically for ourselves, we will just be completely bamboozled and completely brainwashed. We really have to question everything. And I know that can be really tiresome. And I know sometimes it can feel really overwhelming and really frustrating. And another crazy thing, it's wild to me that the media right away started framing the narrative saying that we need to find out if it was a lone gunman or a planned conspiracy type of thing. They said this as if that can't be the same thing. Okay, so it's either or. They say it as if the shooter is going to have a card identifying himself as tied to a three-letter agency. Are you kidding me? Truly, we're just never going to find out the truth. They hide everything. And then just think about people who were previously assassinated or had an attempt. All were challenging the establishment. And all the things we know so far about Trump's assassination attempt are beyond sus. So suspect, so weird, just isn't adding up. How did the bystanders have eyes on the shooter and they notified the police but nothing was done? There are just so many questions. And I heard somewhere that the shooter most of the time was in this blind spot on the roof, a nice place to hide, but yet the people on the ground saw him and notified police. But this area was out of sight for those snipers on the other roof. They plan all of this ahead of time. They have all of these plans in place to protect, and they would certainly have had that blind spot under control. And someone would have been there protecting that area. Common sense. There's just so many obvious things here that are messed up. And I'm so glad people are questioning this scenario. And like I said, literally question everything. Like I mentioned, it's not a Republican versus Democrat thing. It's all the same. Usually the person picked for presidency is in that position because they will go along with the dark global elite agenda. And like I mentioned, I truly believe that Trump is an anomaly to this. This idea of democracy is all an illusion. The dark global elite has all of these mechanisms in place to have the odds ever in their favor when it comes to the government control and the economy. And we think we control with our vote, and we sort of have a say, but there are so many mechanisms of control the entire way. And like I mentioned, I don't align with Republican or Democrat because I do see this division and duality of a two-party system all an illusion and a ploy to make us think and feel like we have a say. But I will say, like I've said 3 times now, I think Trump is an anomaly here. And I do think he actually wants to create change and knows much more about the darkness behind the scenes, this dark global elite group, than he can say out loud to society without freaking everyone out. And also, call me crazy, but I do not think that is the original Biden. Like I mentioned in my episode about the dark pyramid of global control, the government is one of the pillars of control and is one of the levels of this pyramid. The dark global elite use these politicians as puppets of control and have mechanisms set up so the people who comply with the agenda rise to power in the government. But Trump is the anomaly here and is going against the agenda and against the establishment, so they want him gone. And all of the ways so far have failed, like attacking him in the media, trying to paint him as non human essentially, trying to go after him with the law. And now none of those efforts have worked, so they try to attempt assassination. This dark web of control is becoming quite obvious. Did you hear on The View Whoopi Goldberg said she doesn't care if Biden has pooped his pants or can even put a sentence together? She said, "Show me he can't do the job, and then I'll say, okay, maybe it's time to go." Hollywood and mainstream media is such propaganda. It's just unbelievable. It's so clear as day. And people still believe that Biden is actually doing something. The boy is a puppet and a figurehead for this darkness. And on the topic of mainstream media and Hollywood and how it's literally all propaganda, did you see the different legacy media article titles coming out about the attempted assassination? Some of them were framing the story as Trump falls on stage. And some people say, well, that was really early on before we knew much. And I don't know the timeline exactly, so I won't really go into that. But let's just think about that for a second. And if we didn't have these different sources like TikTok and X, where individuals share their own opinions and share videos of firsthand what was happening, like for example, you may have seen this. I saw it all over my TikTok feed. The firsthand videos of people saying there's a shooter on the roof and trying to get the attention of the police. If we didn't have these apps and a way to share amongst ourselves and to everyone in the public and everyone in society, we would be listening to these legacy media companies completely lie and skew the narrative and think that's how society used to be. Before people could just share their opinion, share firsthand information on the internet, we were believing all of this information we've been fed. And then connect that to the media saying TikTok is ran by the Chinese and how they need to ban TikTok. And then if you even go back to before X was bought by Elon Musk, Twitter was facing those censorship lawsuits, how it all came out. Look this up if you haven't heard of it. But Twitter had these lawsuits recently because it came out they were censoring a lot of different posts. And some of them were pro Trump posts. Some of them were literally from doctors sharing their research or their opinion on COVID. And it wasn't going along with this narrative that the media was trying to push around COVID. So Twitter was taking it off and censoring these articles. And another big censorship was around the Hunter Biden laptop scandal. Seriously, watch some of these lawsuits and read about the cases. It's just so clear now that these different big tech companies and these legacy media companies are really censoring. And we think we have free speech, but they're really carefully trying to censor what we say while making us think we have free speech and we live in the home of the brave and the land of the free. It's so important we open our eyes. Just step back and think how COVID would have been different, how this attempted assassination would have been different, how any of these big scandals or big historic events, how they would have played out if we didn't have TikTok, if we didn't have X, if we didn't have the internet to share our opinions and share information we had. We would only be able to talk about this with the people around us. And even now, with all of this information out there, all of these views being shared, we have so been programmed with this concept of conspiracy theory. All of this is right in front of our eyes. It's happening right in front of our eyes. And to me, it's pretty clear. But still, even the people around you, when you talk to them, you might feel a little sheepish and say, so I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but you know how many times I've heard that recently? And I'll admit, I even do that sometimes. But we need to make everyone feel okay with sharing their opinion. We've come from a time where people are attacked for sharing their own opinion. Like people were being attacked if they were for Trump. People just get attacked over nothing. And yeah, there is a dark side of the internet too, because a lot of the time we see all this hate and stuff being spread, and it seems like that's just the loud minority. They're just being really outspoken and shouting from the rooftops So we might think, okay, this is the majority. Everyone must think this, and I must be the black sheep. I must be weird. I must have a different opinion. Also, just a side note, look up bot farms. Who knows if these people attacking you are even people or it's just one of these bot farms. And these bot farms are putting out and trying to create a prevailing point of view. We just need to get to a place where we feel comfortable with each other. We listen to each other's ideas, opinion, and we don't attack each other. Because truly, I don't think people should feel sheepish and be embarrassed to say, wait, I'm connecting these dots. This isn't adding up. It's not making sense logically, but I don't want to be attacked and I don't want people to say I'm crazy and a conspiracy theorist. And I go back to this a lot with people I know, with myself. I've probably mentioned it on here countless times already. But we are born here on earth as little babies, and we have to be taught everything. We have to be taught about society, what's normal. We go to school, we're taught by the education system, by our parents, by the people around us. It's not like we come in here having a sense of direction already. We are programmed essentially from birth. Literally, we go to school and we're indoctrinated. We're taught what to think, how to think, what's normal, what's right, what's wrong. We're taught all of this and it shapes us. And literally, if you were born into a prison and you didn't know better, you had no benchmark of what life was like outside of that prison, you would think that's normal. We really need to keep this in mind when we are feeling like we're an outsider or we're crazy. And look at all this crazy stuff that's going on around us. That's the crazy part. We're not crazy. We need to feel confident when we do question everything. We need to feel confident and work on our intuition, work on our connection to a higher power. That's what we really need to lean in and trust. Don't listen to people around you if they're trying to tear you down or say you're crazy or want you to comply with how society's working and the rules of society. So I really think this is important to keep in mind. But back to the shooter for a moment. In another episode, I talk about mind control, and I didn't deep dive into it there, but I did mention MK Ultra. And that was a CIA experiment that was going on. And it was the CIA's secret quest for mind control. And they used torture, trauma, and LSD. And there's a really interesting creator on TikTok. Her name is JK Ultra. And she deep dives into these different rabbit holes and theories. And she put out such an interesting video. You really need to go watch it. It's called Part 3, MK Ultra, Assassins and Entrapment. And she connects a lot of things in this video and talks about how the CIA and FBI will entrap people to basically do their dirty work like assassinations. And she goes into some different examples from history and deep dives into it on her channel. So definitely go listen. I'm not going to summarize it all here. But essentially, these three-letter agencies will entrap people, like, for example, people with mental health issues, and get them to do their dirty work for them. And how convenient if they do something like a shooting or assassination, then you can have the media blame it on a lone shooter who has mental health issues and all this, and that can be your scapegoat, and everyone will believe it. But I do think we're to a point on this last assassination attempt. I just don't see how people would even believe that now. All of this evidence and all of these details are not matching up at all. It really is showing that it clearly was an inside job. Okay, this next part I think is pretty interesting. I know a lot of people who are even spiritual, they'll look at events like this and say it's all a play. And I actually think that's very much aligned with what the dark global elite view it as. I've heard people say other things along those lines as it's all a play. And I've heard people talk about how we all come here and play out different roles, what we dualistically believe as good and bad, and play out those different roles. So essentially, if you think that, then yeah, it might be all a play. But I don't align with this viewpoint. And like I said, I believe this viewpoint is very much aligned with the dark global elite and those fourth dimensional beings that I talk about in other episodes. And from an Earth perspective, you could view those fourth dimensional beings as what we archetypally think of as demons. And then this plays into the idea that there's no such thing as good and evil. And I understand this, and I guess I do agree. On a dualistic level, those are two opposite dualities, and we should avoid dualities. And truly, when we think of good and evil, it's just a matter of your perspective. And there's a lot of gray in situations. And I've talked about the background of the dark global elite and why they're here and why there's a false matrix. And where this comes into play with good and evil and a matter of perspectives. We talked about how the dark global elite got into the situation they're in now, how they're now controlling humanity using their energy and manipulating everyone so they can continue on living and controlling everyone on Earth via this false matrix of control. And I talk about how archetypally we view them as fallen angels. And I talk about how everyone outside of this is directly connected to source energy and connected to God. And when we're connected to that energy, we are self sustained. We don't need outside energy. We don't need energy from anything or any other people. And that God energy completely sustains us and we live in bliss and freedom. So the dark global elite, they started out as great normal beings like light beings, people of the light, souls of the light, whatever you want to call it. And then they wanted to do an experiment. What happens if you disconnect from that source energy? That's where we get the term fallen angels. They fell. They were angelic beings connected to the light, and now they're no longer sustained by God and connected to that energy. So then, now without that connection, they do have to go and get energy somewhere else. And that's how it came about that they used humanity's energy and harvest their energy. So humanity is truly sustaining them, and that's why they have to control and manipulate humanity so they don't realize their divinity and their true power, and it keeps them controlled and manipulated. Because if humanity woke up to their true divinity and true power, they would cut that off and know what was really happening and how it actually all works. So you can have some empathy for them that it was an experiment gone wrong, is what got them in the place they are now. So, yeah, you can have some empathy for the situation. So, this is where comes in there's not really good or bad, it's just your perspective. So, one side of the argument could look at this dark global elite group and think that's not okay, that they're using humanity, harvesting their energy. Look at humans, look at humanity. When you come into this incarnation, you can't choose when you leave. You can potentially live a long, hard life, and even at the end of your life, you might be in misery, pain, die a slow death, and you can't escape it essentially. And you could really view humanity as slaves to this dark global elite group. And I do think one side of this thinks that's not okay. Humanity needs to be totally freed. No, there's no reason that souls need to incarnate into this earth experience. This is not okay. Souls need to be freed from having this experience. And then I think the other side of the argument looks at it and understands this was an experiment and now we are here. And they feel sorry for them being the dark global elite, and don't want to have to essentially recycle their souls into new energy because energy cannot be created nor destroyed, only transmuted. So their souls would just go back into source energy. But I think they view it as, look, there's no karmic cycle anymore. Souls can get out of the karmic trap. Souls just come to earth, live a life here, experience it, and then they go back up and continue to live in total bliss and freedom and live in what we archetypally call heaven. I really think they say, look, souls aren't stuck there. It's just an experience and they'll get out. And I do think this is where we hear this whole narrative that some people say, and they say that Earth is a school for souls, an advanced school. And I understand that. I do think you could view it as that narrative. But I also think the other side of the perspective says, hey, we have eternity. We don't need to go and learn these advanced hard lessons. But I personally think humanity should all be freed and no one should have to struggle like this or undergo some of these hardships or be essentially slaves to the dark global elite. It sucks they got here, but I think everyone deserves total freedom. I talked about it on another episode that I do think we've had steps and phases in this. I think in the beginning, you could get stuck in a karmic trap, in a karmic loop where you do keep on incarnating here if you have karma to clear. That certainly is not freedom. That's terrible. And then I talked about how I think there was another phase of this where your beliefs determine what happens after. If you believe in that karmic cycle and karmic loop, then you do keep coming. But I've mentioned it before. But now in this phase, I don't think the karmic cycle or karmic loop is a thing anymore. I think we're past that, and humanity's totally freed from that now. But so back to the whole idea that this is all just a play. I think that line of thinking, like I said, goes along with the side of the dark global elite and whoever is on that side, the fourth dimensional beings. Because I think when you believe that, you just think it's all a play. I'm not going to care. Nothing matters. Nothing has meaning until you give it meaning. And I've heard all of that before. And I really think if you believe that, then you're just stuck in a place where you're not taking action or helping, and you're not trying to push for change. So, yeah, I personally don't think it's a play. I think it really matters. I think people are here for a purpose, and I think your life has deep meaning. And I've mentioned it a lot, but I think you have a really special and a really unique mission and purpose here in this incarnation and in this life. So, another thing I'll add about TikTok. So, we all probably know that it was supposed to be banned, and there was a big case against it, and the government voted to ban the app. And I think they said it'll be around a year. This, to me, is totally an aim and a grasp at our free speech. Because, like I mentioned already, TikTok and X and other places on the internet really are places where individuals can share their thoughts, opinions, and their firsthand experiences. I truly think TikTok is such a threat to this dark global elite and their agenda and their control. But it just came out, Trump is saying if he becomes president, he is on this side of TikTok and he will not let the government ban the app. And then on another note, back to X, Elon Musk bought Twitter and then changed the name to X. He revealed after the attempted assassination on Trump, Elon Musk revealed that he has recently faced 2 assassination attempts in the last 8 months. And look, X is another platform and another place for free speech. I don't know. To me, it's pretty obvious. It's pretty clear by now that the dark global elite will try to take out anyone who's a threat, anyone who's a threat to their agenda and their false matrix of control. And any app that allows people to challenge the narrative that the Start group is sending out, they want to go after that. Don't let all of this scare you, though. I know hearing all of this, going down these rabbit holes, etc., can be really scary when you feel like you have no control. I was talking to someone recently, and they said they try and stay away from conspiracy theories because the rabbit holes can be dark and scary, and it's not like they can do anything about it. And then I was like, whoa, 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 okay. Don't have that mindset. I really believe we can do stuff about it. You're forgetting your divinity. But before you feel helpless and afraid, remember all of my content I've been sharing. We, you and me, we are the divine beings and have way more power than we realize. The dark global elite have no power, and that's why they go to such lengths to manipulate us so they can use us as slaves, essentially. Question everything and do things to get your mind and vibe right. Take care of your body and your soul. Love yourself. Get in touch with your power and your divinity. And always, always, always keep in mind that concept that if you were born into a prison, you would have 0 comparison points, 0 benchmark, and you would not even realize you are living in a prison. They program and brainwash us from birth. I'll admit, sometimes I feel a little disillusioned and a little down about it, and I think, WTF. I'm sharing all of this info on social media and on a podcast. So many people would listen to this and say my content is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Like, I'm aware of that. But then I just think about all the stuff that's right in front of our face that we literally see. It's right there. All of these pillars of control. It's so clear how messed up society is, how our food is poisoning us. There's just so much interface that is clear as day. We just need to open our eyes and have the eyes to see. And we're truly living through a pivotal time on Earth. And it's so normal to think sometimes, oh my gosh, dang, I need to go outside and touch some grass. So if you feel disillusioned sometimes, hey, I'm right there with you. And just think back to the prison concept I just said. We have been brainwashed and programmed from birth. We're given all of these ideas and concepts and even taught how to think growing up. So when we start to question everything we've grown up in, it's going to feel like we're going crazy sometimes. That's normal. There's so many people going through this with you, including me. And I support you. And also, another thing that I think about often, and I've mentioned it before, I have felt that God, all there is, the great mystery, I have felt that feeling in my heart. And once you know that feeling, you know we're meant for so much more. There's so much more than this life, than working a 9-to-5 job. Some people are struggling to put groceries on their table. People you see all the time, they're stressed out trying to raise their kids. People are stressed out. People are worrying. People are trying to do their best. I just know there's so much more than this. That feeling of God's love, that feeling of all there is, that powerful, potent energy, there's so much more than this. And that's ultimately what we need to always remember and go back to. That's why it's so important to have that spiritual base and spiritual foundation. But I don't even mean that in a woo-woo way. Like I talk about a lot, once you understand all of this, you realize the spiritual idea is just reality. And you can tie it back to quantum physics. It's just reality. We have just been so brainwashed away from it. So ultimately, I think what we really need to do in these times is really work on getting in touch with ourselves, our own souls, meditating, spending time in silence, and just getting back in touch with God, which, like I mentioned, God is not external, God is internal. We connect to God, this great mystery, source energy, internally. So connect with yourself, connect with your soul, connect with your heart. And when you're feeling rocky or unsure, do that and just get yourself on stable ground by getting that spiritual base sturdy again. And I'm right there with you. I have to remind myself of this too. I've been feeling really overwhelmed and really busy with just travel. I did some fun traveling, but then I went right into a work trip and then get home and I'm hosting people for a whole week and a whole weekend and I haven't been home in a week and it feels so overwhelming. And then I think, oh my gosh, I have my 9 to 5 job that's paying my bills, but then I have what I'm actually passionate about, my podcast, and just trying to juggle it all. It's a lot. And I know others even have way more going on than me and have way more stressors in their life than me. I totally understand that. But truly, when we feel overwhelmed and stressed out, I really do know we just need to get back to that spiritual base, that connection with a higher power, with source energy, with God, and just get our heads straight again. And you can do this through prayer, meditation, mindful walks in nature. There's so many ways you can reconnect with God and reconnect with yourself. So, I don't know, it's funny. I wasn't even planning on going there. I think I've mentioned before, sometimes I'll write out what I want to talk about. And I didn't even plan to get into this, but I feel like as much as anything, this was a good reminder for myself. Like I felt really overwhelmed today and was running all these errands and doing all of these things. And I feel like this was just a great reminder for myself. Like, hey, chill out. Don't be overwhelmed. You're just feeling rocky. Get your spiritual base. Get yourself centered again. So I love that. I feel so much better. Oh, I love it. And I love you. On a similar note of good vibes. So, in another episode, I talked about timelines and where our consciousness is at, how we have a conscious timeline. So, I want to get into that a little bit because I might sound crazy when I say this, but I just feel like when it comes to the attempted assassination on Trump, if you look at videos of how that bullet went right by his head and how his head was turned, and if his head was turned in that line of sight, it would have hit him. But he literally turned his head at the exact right moment and the bullet grazed his ear. That paired with a lot of other stuff that's coming out and that's happening, I'm not even kidding. I feel like we truly shifted to a positive timeline, like to our highest timeline. So when I say I think we shifted to a positive timeline or our highest timeline, that is because our level of consciousness is rising. Like everything I talk about, from how we create our own reality by our emotional frequency we are putting out, and our habits and our overall vibration. And it certainly ties into what I talk about on the Schumann resonance episode. So all of this is all tied together. And when we raise our consciousness as a collective, that's how we have these huge positive timeline shifts. So this is all energetics. And I take this as such a great sign. This is so awesome. We really should view this like a victory. And it really shows that the love we're sharing with others, keeping our high vibes, sharing our knowledge and empathy and compassion with others, all of this is really making a difference. I truly see this as a big example and a big victory that all of the stuff we're doing is truly, truly making a difference. And I also wanted to mention the whole idea of divine intervention and divine guidance as well, because I think you can confuse divine intervention or divine guidance with more high level energetics. And I do think there is a such thing as divine intervention where what we archetypally call angels, they are helping intervene to keep us safe and guide us in the right direction. So that's certainly a thing. But I view this situation as more of an energetic, a shift in a timeline because our consciousness is rising and the collective consciousness is rising. So truly, I think we should look at this like such a good sign and such a big win. This means not only is what we think of as an angelic being protecting someone or guiding someone individually, this is happening on a collective level. This shows as a collective, our consciousness is rising, and now this collective is on the highest timeline. I just really want to stress how big I think this really was and really is. So be proud of yourself and keep up the good work. And I love that you're listening, and I hope this was helpful. And like I always say, if you found it helpful and it resonated, leave a 5-star review or share it with friends or loved ones, and have a great week.